excited to be back at Indianapolis and officially start the 2025 season. I want to start off by thanking Jeff Foster and his crew. Every year they do an amazing job, and none of this would be possible without their hard work and help. Real quickly, I want to give a shout out to my scouting staff for the job they do all year long, away from their families on the road, getting our staff geared up for the off season. Every off season, there seems to be a unique challenge, and this will be no different. We have a lot of good players that are pending free agents, and so anxious to get with their agents and discuss hopefully long-term plans with a bunch of them. And on top of that, I mean, obviously excited for the new draft prospects that we get to meet here. So last season, congratulations to the Chiefs, our organization, Clark, Mark, Andy. If you'd have told me at the start of last season we went 15-1, and obviously the games that our starters played, and then have a chance to beat a good Houston team and beat Buffalo, would have been super happy. But as we all know, we're a little disappointed by the way the Super Bowl went. But like everything in life, you learn from your losses. Congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles, Jeffrey, Howie, an amazing team. We have a lot of work to do to get back to where we need to be. But I mean, this is the start of the process, so we look forward to that. So with that, I'll take your questions. Yeah, I'm not sure how Coach answered that. How we left at the end of the season is that he was fired up. He has one more year under contract, and still think he has that fire and desire to play. And as far as I'm concerned, there is no deadline. I think we left it as he'd be back, and we're excited to get him back and get him going.
So we're going to look at for other two guys like Duffy and Karlaftis who might be on contract for one more year?
Yeah, that'll be on the list of things to do. We'll get through, obviously, this phase here. We'll get with the agents on the pending free agents and put a free agency plan together. And then I would anticipate getting through the draft and then having the summer to work with. But certainly those are two really good players, and I'd like to get those guys hopefully done if possible. But we'll certainly have dialogue if not before the draft, right after the draft.
Does your philosophy in the draft change as later rounds go on and there's all that cost potential? Is your mindset the same?
Yeah, I think we just exhaust the numbers. I think every year it's, and we always talk about that in our scouting meetings. For the most part, I mean, you look at the draft, and pretty much from every team from 1 down to 32, I mean, they're going to have the top 30, 40, 50 guys. They're all going to be the same, and then as the rounds go on, there'll be a big discrepancy. And so that when you do get to the 5th, 6th, 7th rounds, I mean, there'll be guys that we draft in the 5th that other teams don't even have on their board, and vice versa. There'll be guys that we drafted other teams don't have on their board. So I think that the window to capitalize on, hidden talent is bigger. Again, I think all the names are the same the first 2 or 3 rounds, but once you get into the later rounds, it's how much tape work you're digging on and the vision, and this is why I think we do a good job of kind of trimming the fat and really narrowing the guys we like in those late rounds and going over all those names with the coaches. I think we have a pretty good process, but really it's just a matter of the time spent, and I think the additional time that we spent, I think, really has paid off the last few years. Yeah, I mean, he's obviously be at the top of the list, and we've already had some good dialogue with him and with CAA and Torrey and Jimmy and his crew. So obviously a lot to work through, but I mean, this is the time of the year to do that. And again, we've already had some initial dialogue, and that will continue on this week and in the days to come leading up before free agency. So we'll certainly do what we can and feel, pretty optimistic about our possibilities there.
Along the same lines of that offensive line, though, when I watch the Super Bowl, it kind of reminds me of the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes running for his life. Where would you put priority at left tackle this offseason?
I think like every offseason, I don't want to speak for all the teams. I think every offseason it's offensive line and defensive line. I mean, you got to get a quarterback, right? And so we have one, and we're blessed to have one. But I think if you look at how we've handled the offseasons, whether it was a Joe Thuney or trading for a Brown or a Taylor or Frank Clark or Chris Jones, I mean, Mike Dana last year. I mean, we're always investing in the offense and defensive lines. It's just some years you have more numbers to work with than others, and I mean, that would probably be a similar challenge this year, and it's just coming up with some different, unique plans. But I think our priority is always on the fronts first, and this will be no different.
Running backs, the free agent market seems like the rest of the league. What do you think the impact will be of Derrick Henry's success, Saquon's success? Do you envision seeing an uptick in maybe some running back contracts?
Yeah, I think there's a good possibility. It's funny, Brooke, you mentioned that. I was just talking to an agent. He had a couple running backs coming up, and I said if you'd asked me a few years ago, I wouldn't have been as optimistic. But with the years, some of the guys that signed last year had, I think everything kind of comes full circle, and teams always it goes and flows. Where it's a run league, then it's a pass league, then it gets a little bit more balanced. But I certainly think when you have those, especially when you have those unique guys that have a full skill set where they can run, catch, and block, I think you'll start to see those guys coming back up to where they should be in the market.
In what regard will you miss Mike Downs?
Well, shoot, Mike was like a best friend for me. I mean, he was the first guy I met when I came to Kansas City. We shared an office together for years, and he was one of those guys that when you go through a transactional period, whether it be free agency or the draft, I mean, you're always going to have big group discussions, small group discussions, discussion with your head coach, and then you're going to pull a guy to the side to really just share your thoughts and ideas with, and he was that guy for me. So I'm going to miss that, and I'm sure we'll still have some of those dialogues now when we're both vying for a same position or a same need. Maybe we won't be as forthcoming with each other, but he's a great guy. I'm really happy for him and his family, and I think he'll do some really good things there in Tennessee.
One of the things that interesting about the year you guys have had in the last couple of years, other than great success, Patrick Mahomes, his average depth of target has gone down year after year. And last year, he was 41st on 43 quarterbacks. Is that a function of just lack of personnel, injuries this year, receiver? How do you feel like you're trying to address that so he's not doing the bottom of that?
What was
In the average depth of target,
okay.
numbers have gone down
Yeah.
the last couple of years, really kind of bottomed out this year. Is that a personnel thing to you? Is it an injury thing? How do you try to address it so he's not at the bottom?
Yeah, no, I think it's a combination of everything, and I think we again approach every offseason where we want to get him not overthinking. He's grown and developed so much where Coach Nagy and I talk about this, where he knows maybe too much at this point, where he's seeing things that maybe defenses don't even do now because he's that far advanced. But I think it just comes down to settling his feet and him trusting the protection up front, and that's a continual point of emphasis for us, and that's why we always make it a priority to invest in the lines, and I think we'll have that approach. It's just it becomes more difficult, and that's why the league is so great. I mean, the more you win, the harder it's supposed to be, and so when you have a bunch of guys that are at the top of the market for their position, and then you have to pick last or close to last every year, it becomes really challenging. So you just have to kind of think outside the box and put some creative plans together, and we've been able to do that in different areas, different positions, and that's where the focus will be. Just continue to have him play confident behind the pocket, and we'll certainly always look to add weapons. And the last 2 years we've added 2 great receivers. It was a shame Rasheed got hurt because I think he had a chance to be a top 10 receiver, and then the progress Worthy made last year. I think those guys will be a dynamic combination, and we'll see if we can get Hollywood back. But again, receiver will be a position too that we'll never shy away from.
Maybe similar to the free agents with as far as running backs. There's a couple projected to go in the first round this year. Do you think that's a byproduct of the strength of this running back class, or the way that offenses are trending in general?
I think it's a combination of both. Obviously, the Boise State kid, I think when you have tape that is that dominant, and when you have a skill set that performs at the level he did week in and week out, anytime you watch a player and the projection is easy, you feel more comfortable in investing. And again, when you put out tape at that high a level, you're always going to come into play. But I think it's a combination of both, and I think that this is a deep running back class. I think that's the one position offensively. I think it's deep running back. In general, I think it's more of a defensive draft. I think that the talent is on the defensive line and the corners, and I think it's a solid linebacking crew. So, but again, I think, and also teams are, you need more than one. I mean, it's a long season, and you have to have a good tandem there. And You saw the Niners the last few years when they were operating at their peak. I mean, they had the guys like, the young undrafted free agent with McCaffrey with Elijah Mitchell. I mean, they've had a tandem there for a while. So I think having multiple running backs is a trend too that could elevate where those guys go.
You've had a lot of success in drafting late round running backs. Is that because there's not a lot of variety necessarily in the position, or are you just hitting on gems late?
I think it's because, again, going back to generally the philosophy of most teams, you're going to have O-line, D-linemen that maybe they don't have the best tape, but they have qualities to work with. And they're going to go higher. I mean, you could have a lineman that maybe has played a limited amount, but I mean, they have the size, the length, the athletic ability to work with. I mean, those guys probably go ahead of running backs that have rushed for 1,000 yards for 3 years. So what happens is you get guys like that logjam late in the draft, and you have a lot of these guys, and it's a matter of working through all the names and then finding the fit to make sure he fits what we do offensively. And I think that's what we did with Isaiah. It's just corners, tackles, defensive linemen. Those guys are going to go. When their tape's good, they go high. And when their tape's average, they're still going to go in the middle rounds. Whereas the running backs, I mean, you can have a running back that rushes for 1,000 yards for 3 years and still go in the 6th or 7th round. So I think that's typically why there's more of a likelihood of hitting on running backs late in the draft.
When you look at the division and you see the coaches, especially in Vegas, you look at the 4 head coaches now in the AFC West. How would you characterize this group?
Well, it's outstanding, and on top of the hire that Vegas made, I'm close with John Spytek, and surprised he wasn't a GM sooner. I mean, he's a really talented guy. He's a guy that I work with in Philadelphia. So between him and obviously Coach Payton and Coach Harbaugh and Coach Reed, I mean, it's an all-star lineup. And I mean, look, again, we had a really successful regular season, went 15-1. But if you look at the games that we played against the Chargers and the games we played against the Broncos, they were probably our toughest games and our most physical games, and that's not going to change. And those teams are only going to add to what they have talent-wise and get better. So it'll be a challenge just to win the division next year, and I think that's kind of the mindset we have going in the offseason.
Thanks, everybody. We gotta go. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
How many do you think can go in the first 2 rounds? It seems like there's a lot of guys.
Oh, shoot. I mean, that's a good question. We probably have 5 to 6 right now, but I mean that number, it will probably, as soon as some of these guys that we have in a 3rd round run 4-4, 4-3, then all of a sudden that number goes from 6 to 8 to 9 pretty quickly. So it's a good group. That group and the defensive line group is really deep. So hopefully we can add to our roster for sure at some point in the draft. Yep. Thanks.